Welcome to the Edgeworth Echoes podcast. Discovering Edgeworthstown, a hidden gem of Irish history.
Welcome to another episode of Edgeworth Echoes podcast. I'm your host, John. In this story, we look at the short life of William Edgeworth, a man linked to several engineering projects, including building roads and bridges, spires and church roofs, as well as making maps. William Edgeworth was the seventh son of Richard Lovell Edgeworth, and his third wife, Elizabeth Snyde, was born on the 27th of January 1794 in Edgeworthstown. William grew up in a unique household where the ideas of practical education were guiding the early education of the young children. Maria writes about William taking part with other family members in a play she wrote called Whim to Whim in 1798 and another play in 1805 called Journey to London. One visitor to Edgeworthstown was the Swiss scientist Marc-Auguste Pictet in 1802, and he recommended to Richard Lovell that an engineering might be a suitable career for William. At the age of 15, William began his engineering studies, guided by his father, who was then undertaking a survey of the bogs for the British government. As a young man, William spent time with William Strutt, an acquaintance of Richard Lovell Edgeworth. William Strutt was the son of Jedediah Strutt, the cotton manufacturer. William worked as an engineer in the Strutt factory. Richard Lovell worked with William on a new spire for the family church of St. John's, coming up with the idea of prefabricating it on the ground and hauling it into position on the church tower. The spire was erected in 1811 and stood in position until the 1930s when a storm forced its removal. Maria Edgeworth wrote about the final stages of the erection of the spire.
Walk with me to the church and see William standing on the scaffolding around the top of the church tower, which looks like the main mast of a man of war. William gives the signal, and the four men at the corner capstans work the windlasses, and in a few moments, with a slow, majestic motion, the spire begins to ascend. Its gilt ball and arrow glitter higher and higher in the sun, and its iron skeleton rises by beautiful degrees until, in 12.5 minutes, its whole transparent form is high in the air and stands composed and sublime in its detained situation. It is retired once more to the inside of the church to be slated and finally raised amid the plaudits of a large assembly on September the 19th, 1811. It was then bolted down and built into the tower where it now stands.
In 1812, William with his family attended the launch of a hot air balloon in Dublin, in which James Sadler was attempting to fly across the Irish Sea from Ireland to England, an attempt which failed but was later undertaken successfully by James's son William Sadler in 1817. In 1813, William completed a detailed map of County Longford, a copy of which can be seen in the Maria Edgeworth Centre. When his father was taken ill in 1814, William continued his father's experiments with springs for carriages, as well as assisting with the building of a bridge in Longford. He submitted a treatise on carriage wheels to the Royal Dublin Society in 1816. The bridge was to be the last project he worked on with his father, who passed away in 1817. Alexander Nimmo was a Scottish civil engineer and geologist. Like Richard Lovell, Nimmo was commissioned to carry out a survey of the bogs. Nimmo was also constructed a harbour and lighthouse in Dunmore East in Waterford for the British Postal Service. William Edgeworth worked with Alexander Nimmo on the Oughterard-Clifton Road in County Galway. William wrote a letter to Alexander Nimmo on the 1st of January 1823, explaining some of the science behind his map of Roscommon.
At your request, I send you an account of a few of the principal triangles upon which the map of the county of Roscommon was constructed. I have calculated the sides from a base measured on the road from Longford to Edgeworthstown, an account of which was published in my father's report on the bog district. On my map of the county of Longford I have published the principal triangles upon which it was founded, and the latitude was determined from observations of the pole star, with an instrument of 16 inches diameter that Major Taylor most kindly lent to me. The longitude of Edgeworthstown was determined from the Observatory of Dublin by the valuable assistance of Dr. Brinkley. The principal angles in Roscommon I took in the year 1814, with a 6-inch theodolite made by Troughton, so that the longitude of the stations in the county of Longford may be considered as certain within a furlong. I have connected the triangulation through Roscommon with some of the stations made use of by Mr. Bald in his excellent map of Mayo.
William also worked on roads in County Waterford and County Kerry. He was working on the road to Glengariff when his sister Maria visited him in the company of Sir Walter Scott in 1825. In 1824 he was appointed by the Ordnance Survey to carry out a statistical survey of County Longford. Mapping was a contentious issue in Ireland as it was considered a tool for colonisation and seizure of lands. Richard Griffith described how people sometimes threw down his equipment, which he attributed to ignorance, not political opposition. William Edgeworth found that people were generally cooperative, although he was very careful to seek their goodwill before beginning. He paid people before setting marks on their land, he never carried firearms, and he always explained how the survey would benefit people. Griffith and Edgeworth would work together on a map of Roscommon. Another person William worked with was Daniel Beaufort, the father of Frances Beaufort, Richard Lovell's fourth wife. Daniel was also the father of Sir Francis Beaufort, developer of the Beaufort wind scale. Daniel was also a noted cartographer, creating a detailed map of Ireland in 1792. Daniel and William devised a way of imitating fan vaulting in lath and plaster for the ceiling of the Protestant church at Collin, County Louth, and William constructed this with the assistance of William Fletcher in 1818. In 1827, with the engineer Henry Haberley Price, he carried out a survey of the Tees River, where a canal was being proposed as a shortcut to the sea. Then he returned to Ireland to continue his work on road construction. The pioneer of the computer, Charles Babbage, in his book Passages from the Life of a Philosopher, describes the money pump, an invention of William's that enabled beggars to earn some money by working rather than begging.
Mr. Edgeworth, whose country residence was much frequented by beggars, resolved to establish a test for discriminating between the idle and the industrious, and also to obtain some small return for the alms he was in the habit of bestowing. He accordingly added to the pump by which the upper part of his house was supplied with water a piece of mechanism so contrived that, at the end of a certain number of strokes of the pump handle, a penny fell out from an aperture to repay the labourer for his work. This was so arranged that labourers who continued at the work obtained very nearly the usual daily wages of labour in that part of the country. The idlest of the vagabonds, of course, refused this new labour test, but the greater part of the beggars, whose constant tale was that they could not earn a fair day's wages for a fair day's work, after earning a few pence, usually went away cursing the hardness of their taskmaster.
In 1829, William was elected as a member of the Institute of Civil Engineers, but he did not enjoy this position for long. He came back to Edgeworthstown from the west of Ireland with a very bad cough, which the family doctors diagnosed as consumption, an illness which had afflicted several members of the Edgeworth family. He passed away on the 8th of May 1829 at the age of 35, having achieved a lot in a short life.
My dear Sophie, I cannot forbear writing, especially to you, as I know you will feel so much about Captain Beaufort's appointment to the hydrographership. I wish poor William had been permitted the pleasure of hearing of it. It would have given him pleasure even on his dying bed, noble, generous creature as he was. He would have rejoiced for his friend, and have felt that merit is sometimes rewarded in this world. Very touching letters have come to us from people whom we scarcely knew, whom William had attached so much, and many whom he had employed speak of him as the kindest of masters and as a benefactor whose memory will be ever revered. He has done all the good in his power to his fellow creatures, even to the last of his life.
And so ends another episode of the Edgeworth Echoes podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. If you haven't already, please check out other episodes of the podcast and share this with others you know. Until next time. If you are interested in learning more about the Society and the history they preserve, please visit www.mariaedgeworthcentre.com. You can sign up to our newsletter, book tours, learn about our annual literary festival, and read up on some of the remarkable people who have links to our town.
This has been the Edgeworth Echoes podcast, rediscovering history.